God bless everybody today. It's October 18th, 2023. I've talked about how I believe history in the Bible will reflect what's coming, or it's a past to future prophecy. And so I've alluded to how Alexander the Great had come down through the Grecian areas into Turkey, and then basically over a short period of time he took over the Middle East, even down into Egypt, all the way over to Persia, and even a little further. So I think it's important that we go back in history and we look at some of this and see how it reflects, and it might actually apply to us today. And so I wanted to go over some interesting battles that happened during Alexander and how they might affect us, or reflect what might come today. And a few of the dates that I found are also extremely interesting, so sort of keep an eye on those as we move forward, especially potentially a date for an invasion by Turkey. Possibly. We'll see how that turns out. So let's get into this real quick, and I wanted to show you a few things. I'm not going to go into a lot of history. I just wanted to show you some dates and things that I think are extremely important. So I talked about how Alexander the Great did a specific movement down from Greece into Lydia, Turkey. Then he went down into Lebanon, went around Israel, ended up in Gaza, into Egypt, came back to Lebanon, Tyre, went over to Gaugamela, which is Erbil, Iraq, pushed the Kurds down to Baghdad, and then over to Shush, Iran, which would then be your Daniel 8 prophecy. Once Persia falls, you'd have then an absorption of Iran or Persia. That would then start your Ezekiel 38 and 39 prophecy. So when you look at Alexander the Great, when he came from the Grecian areas down into Turkey through Lydia, then he went into Syria. There was a massive battle there. That was a major battle that basically Darius the Mede, or the Kurds, tried to do a counter on him from behind. Darius is destroyed in general, and they fall back towards the east, and then Turkey comes down into Lebanon and all the way to Tyre. They go down through Israel, around Jerusalem, to Gaza. That's extremely important today. Excuse me. End up in Egypt. From Egypt, because Egypt capitulates, and one of the reasons they're going against Egypt is because of this border between Gaza and Egypt, and Erdogan in this case will not believe that Egypt has treated the Gazans very well, and so he's going to cause all kinds of problems for them down there. And so we need to watch how that's going to play out, and I'll sort of explain that a little better as we move forward. So in my opinion, because Hamas is actually the political and the military structure there, Erdogan will eliminate Hamas, which will then free the Palestinian people. But in that same breath, he'll go against Egypt because they didn't do what was required to let the Palestinian refugees out of the country, and which is causing more damage on the Palestinian people themselves. And you know, a lot of these people that are Palestinians, even though a majority of them believe it, you know, Hamas is probably a good thing, not all of them do. And so we need to realize that, you know, they're not all radicalized Muslims, and there's good Muslims out there. I keep saying they're not. I'm not in a beat up the Muslim camp. If they're radical Muslims, then they are what they are, and that's a problem for us. But there are good Muslims, and I have good Muslim friends, and so I don't beat up the Muslims. I appreciate the Muslim people, but I don't like the radical side of the Muslims, and that will be the problem that we run to as we move forward. But if you look at Alexander the Great and you move through this article down into here, it talks about the conquest of the Persian Empire. Now, Granicus, and I'll show you these articles. Let me pull this up just a little further. So Granicus was the first of 3 major battles that Alexander did against the Persian Empire. Now, this one actually occurred in Turkey because at that time Persia owned Turkey or controlled Turkey. So when Alexander came down through Greece, he went into Turkey first. That was the original battle against the Persian Empire, and they lost. And so we're going to skip over that battle to the next couple here. So 2 other battlefronts I believe today are extremely important to what is coming up. Now, we get into Syria and Egypt here, and you're going to see this Issus, Tyre, and then Gaza. And so this is extremely important. I'm not panicking over these because there's some dates here I want you to be aware of as we move forward. And I think they might be important. So as Alexander comes into Turkey, right as we get down into this area of Issus, and I want to show you this on the map just so you can see what's going on here. So I brought up this map so you can see this. So Issus would be right here. Okay, I'm going to show you this on a normal map, and then you got Tyre here, and so he comes down. This is still a little bit of Turkey down in here. And I want to show you how I believe that is going to happen. And then he goes down into Tyre, goes into Israel, down into Gaza. Okay, but look at this area here, and I'm going to show you a different map real quick. So if you come to the regular maps and you blow this up, that Issus battle would be right around in here. Iskenderun is how I'm going to say that. We'll see how that works out. And so this would be a major battle that could happen here. And so I'm looking at this map. Turkey comes all the way up and through here, and then you got the Syrian border. Okay, if the Kurds see Turkey amassing troops to come down into Lebanon because they're going to go help the Gazan people or the Palestinians against Hamas and Israel because they want to liberate the Palestinian people, we would see something really interesting happen. So Turkey's going to bring their troops down in this area here. Okay, sorry about that. It's going to pop up these cities that I run over them. And it's really interesting because the Kurds are going to come and they're going to hit above them and try to cut them off. This is how it happened in the past. Now, whether it will happen this way in the future, we will see. So Turkey starts to amass their army down into here for an invasion force. The Kurds see this happening. The Kurds come up over towards the west above them. This fails. The Kurds are repelled. And in the past, actually, Darius the Mede is defeated, and they fall back towards the east, towards Erbil, Iraq, which is their regional capital. So this is an extremely important place, I think, because I believe once you start to see this amassing of Turkish armies through here, and I've talked about how Turkey's going to get into this. He's going to protect the Gazan people. He's actually threatening our navy and some things to get them out of the way. He's going to protect that border along the Mediterranean Sea, and he's going to come down and he's going to liberate these people from the Israeli occupation that's coming. Okay, so when they see that happen, these Kurds come up, they fail, they fall towards the east, and then he comes down in here. So this would be the first really major battle that would come up against the Kurds and Turkey. And I want to show you something when we go back on that article that I was just on. So when you go to this battle of Issus, and this is important, I think, we'll see if this matters or not. He goes to Issus, which is that city I was just talking about, and then to Tyre. So there's that process. Look at this date that they give us, November 5th. I've been talking about an invasionary date that we could see Turkey actually have an invasion, or we could potentially see that first battle on November 5th, which would then force the Kurds to repel, and then we would get Turkey coming into the battle from the north into Lebanon. So I think it's extremely important. You know, we're only a few weeks, about 2.5 weeks from that date, and we're watching Erdogan bring his navy into the Mediterranean Sea to protect the Gazan border. And so this is a pretty interesting date of November 5th. Potentially we could see a battle on that date. I'm just saying history repeats itself. It seems to, in my world anyway. We'll see how that turns out. The other date that I thought was really interesting, that when you come to Gaza, it's interesting that the siege of Gaza happens in October. Now, this is the siege from Alexander onto Gaza, but we're watching this ramping up into October, and you potentially could see Erdogan, as he's indicated, that Israel, if they go in and do an occupation, systematic cleansing of that area to get out the hostages and go street to street, house to house, systematically through that whole area to reoccupy Gaza because they don't want Hamas there anymore, then we could potentially see Erdogan get into that battle in October. And so, you know, it's not going to be an overnight sensation, but it looks like October, November is starting to look more and more like we're going to see something happen. So I just think it's interesting that we have these potential two dates that we're looking at right now in front of us. October, a siege on Gaza. Yes, we're watching that potentially happen through Israel, but this is not a siege from Israel into Gaza. This would actually be the start of Erdogan protecting the Palestinian people against not only Israel, but Hamas and this leadership organization that is radicalized, because he will try to free the Palestinian people because he's a Muslim. He's going to protect the Muslim people. And so when you have these, even to him, some of these elements are radicalized, just as the Kurds are to him. He thinks they're a terrorist group. It's just that simple. So it's interesting that we potentially would see in October the start of this siege on Gaza, where Turkey joins, and it would make sense that if he brings his warships down there, does live fire, and forces our warships back, that he could actually start exercises against Gaza before the end of this month. Then you would lead us into a potential invasion by November 5th into, and it's not necessarily invasion on that very day, because this is still happening in Turkey at that very location I showed you on the map. Once that happens and the Kurds try to counter them and go over the northern portion of them and try to cut their supply lines off, and then they are repelled or defeated and are repelled, we would see then right after November 5th and this battle an actual invasion into Syria and then down into Lebanon, and then they would head towards Gaza to help with the Palestinian people. And so I just think it's really important that we look at some of these dates. So I want to look at these battles real quick, just so you can see what I'm talking about. This, hopefully you can see a different perspective of what I'm showing you. So Alexander comes down into and starts to pull those armies down into that area. And we'll show you that map real quick. So we're backed into this area. This is still in Turkey. He starts to pull down these military assets so that he can start his invasion into Syria. And the Kurds then try to flank him, and it fails, okay? Now, it indicates that this attack by the Kurds was led by Darius the Mede. I've been talking about Darius the Mede and how they're the Kurds. In this case, it was the second great battle of Alexander, because the first one happened actually in Turkey, and we told that was Granicus. That we're going to skip that battle real quick. So he's in this secondary major battle, and when he does this, he comes down, and Darius just totally gets destroyed, and they fall towards the east. And then he starts coming down into Syria, into Lebanon. And so that's extremely important that you sort of see how that happens. And you can also see that November 5th date, which is coming up. Now, whether we're going to see this battle between the Kurds and Turkey on this very specific date, I don't know, but it seems like history repeats itself on very specific dates, especially in the Jewish calendars, and this is affecting the Jews, or will be affecting the Jews as we move forward. So we'll see how that turns out. But the second battle we need to look at is that Battle of Gaza. And I think this is extremely important because it sort of sets this battle up a little bit. So we have the wars of Alexander the Great, and it takes place, the siege of Gaza takes place in October. I'm telling you, he's already showing you what's going to happen. You just need to figure out how to put the pieces together. So we're going to have this potential siege on Gaza starting in October, and it's not necessarily an Israeli siege. It's going to be a Turkish thing coming up, because they're moving their naval forces over there right now, and so they're going to start a naval siege first, and then they're going to bring a land siege in afterwards. And it's interesting as you get into here that when, in this case, Alexander, today it would be Erdogan, would go against this military leader that commands the city of Gaza, which would be Hamas today, that basically he destroys them, okay? And then he goes down into Egypt, okay? So it's extremely important. And I've talked about why Egypt, and I was asked this question, and I haven't had time to get back to questions. I'm so sorry. I've been so busy here lately, and there's a lot of prepping going on, as well as services for my wife and other things going on, getting ready for winter here. And I'm still trying to keep up with all these articles and information for you guys. So if I'm not getting back to people right away, I'll try to do the best I can. But what we're going to have is, we're going to have then this from Gaza, they're going to go into Egypt. And why is that? Because we're having this problem with refugees right now, just as it was in the past. And also, I talked about Jeremiah, how the king of Judah, or Israel, had paid homage to Nebuchadnezzar, and then he stops. And this sort of is this breakdown between Israel and Turkey that we've seen lately, where they've removed all their diplomats and all this stuff, because Turkey's on a mission to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. He's not getting his way in the EU, and he's now upset with Israel going against the Palestinian people down there in Gaza, and so he's not going to take and tolerate this. And so he's literally going to go down into Israel, into Gaza, to control this situation. But the Egyptians have sort of blocked these corridors off, and so now you're taking 1 million people from the north, compressing them with another million people in the south in a 70 square mile area, because Gaza is about 140 mile square area if you break it down. So they're going to compress this, and they're not letting anyone out. And Hamas isn't either. So this is not going to be making Erdogan real happy. And so he's going to eliminate Hamas, and then he's going down into Egypt, and Egypt will capitulate. They will not do anything. And so in Jeremiah's day, he stopped paying homage to the Babylonian, or in this case would be Turkey. He had aligned, the king of Judah or Israel had aligned with Egypt, but then they started to align with them to the point where they thought Egypt would protect them, but they won't. They're not going to protect them. They're going to run the other way. And because of that, Erdogan's going to come down in there, and God's going to place a judgment on them. Egypt falls into a lot of categories because it's the part of the statue of the seven kingdoms. The Exodus came out of Egypt. The Pharisees and the Pharaoh came out of Egypt. There's a lot of history with Egypt, and so Egypt's just not going to be a good player at the end. And if you look at my paradigm, especially in the second portion, after we see that signing, Egypt has a lot of different judgments against them, to where they're basically, uh, a huge portion of their population dies. Even the king is judged harshly. And so it's extremely important that we look at all those different judgments in the Bible against all these nations. But in this case, we have this Battis, which is a military commander of the Gazan fortress, which is Hamas in this case, and they hold these people hostage. Egypt won't let them out, and so when Darius falls to the east, Turkey comes down into Syria. He then goes into Lebanon to Tyre. He skirts around Jerusalem, ends up in Gaza, eliminates the Hamas problem, and then ends up in Egypt. But then he turns around, goes back to Tyre, Lebanon, and then he ends up in Gaugamela, which is Erbil, Iraq, which is a green zone of ours and the regional capital of the Kurdistan people. Then the Kurds are pushed to Baghdad and Shush. And so I wanted to show you how that actually happens. So if you look at the Middle East map, Turkey's going to come down into this little spot here. The Kurds are going to try to flank them. They're going to fall towards the east and be defeated at this battle. Turkey's going to come down into Lebanon, down into Tyre. They're going to come all the way around Israel, Jerusalem to Gaza, and then into Egypt. They'll come back to Tyre. They'll shoot all the way over to Erbil, push them to Baghdad, and then to Shush. And then once the Kurds pool here, you'll see Iran and the Kurds fall. This area here is that Battle of Gaugamela. This is the Battle of Issus up here. And then you're going to have that Battle of Gaza down here. All this matters because it matters to the Ottoman Empire that he's rebuilding. And then, like I say, on this border, you've got these Egyptians that are basically locking down the Palestinians where they can't move, and so they're not allowing them a corridor over here. Okay, and so this is going to frustrate Erdogan a lot because he's going to protect these Palestinian people, even against Hamas. So that's important. And we looked at that leader of Gaza that's basically defeated. Well, there'll be a similar thing. But what's going to happen is Turkey's going to bring their navy down into here. And what's really interesting is if you look at this area here, which is Cyprus, okay, this is actually Kittim. So when you look at the book and the ships of Kittim in the Bible and things like that, that's actually Cyprus. And Cyprus is actually aligning with Turkey right now. And so this whole area is being controlled by Turkey over here. If they're controlling this area around the Gaza Strip, this is going to force our naval ships to move off, okay? And we're not going to be an effective force over here. And then they're going to blockade this off. and Turkey's going to bring their army down in here and siege this area and protect these Palestinian people. But in that same breath, he's going to bring havoc to this whole area, and he's going to actually get down to Egypt. And that makes sense, because when you go to Ezekiel 38 and 39, two of the nations listed are Put and Cush, which are Libya and Sudan. And so you need to understand that. Again, let's go back and look at those dates real quick. And you look at those two dates that I showed you. Gaza, which is an attack in October by, in this case, the Babylonian or Turkey. And then another date which is very specific. Let me run this up just a little bit. The very specific date of November the 5th, which is potentially an attack from the Kurds onto a amassing Turkey army on the Syrian border for an invasion that's getting ready to happen. And then right after Darius fails in this potential attack on to cut off the Turkish forces and their supply lines, they fail, and then we would see an invasion right after that. God bless everybody. This one's moving fast. If you've been watching anything, you'll realize that Israel is in trouble. And as much as we want to say that we're going to come and help them, I don't think that once Turkey comes into this battle, we're going to stay into this one very long. And it's amazing that when Joey B, President Biden went over to Israel, all the Arab nations shunned him, and Turkey threatened that if Israel goes into Gaza, that would be his red line, because he wants to protect those Palestinian people, and he's not going to allow Iran to destroy the Temple Mount through any means. And so it's extremely important to watch these things. But when you hit specific dates like a battle, on Gaza in October, and then you have a potential battle in the northern, or right above Syria, with Turkey and the Kurds potentially on November 5th, which would then funnel down into Lebanon, Israel, and down into Gaza shortly after that. That December 22nd date just doesn't seem like it's that far-fetched anymore. I just don't think it will be, and I think Turkey is going to be like Alexander the Great. He's going to be unabated to get through this process, and God will get him to this location, and we will see a siege on Jerusalem by December 22nd of 23 if my paradigm plays out. So God bless everybody. Keep your eye on these dates. October seems to be a potential siege on Gaza. Turkey's walking into the back door soon. Nobody's talking about Turkey. And then you have this really interesting date of November 5th and a potential attack right before an invasion by Turkey. It looks to me like the Kurds are going to try to cut those Turkish lines off, and it's going to fail, and then that's going to start this chain of events, which ends up with Turkey down into Egypt to start. And then he pushes the Kurds all the way down, all the way over to Shush, Iran, and destroys them too, prior to an attack on Israel with 10 full nations. All before December 22nd of this year. It's going to be interesting to watch the next few months to see how this plays out. God bless. Have a great night. Find the open door. Find Jesus. It is the only way to the promised land. You gotta find the Son. Without him, you can't be saved. It's just that simple. God bless. Have a great night.